Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you guys remember during Vlogmas 2021, I did a Q&A wrapping presents with me type video, and from some of that discussion in that video came the topic of how Joe and I became debt-free, and I asked if there was any interest on sharing our story on how we became debt-free, and there was. So I wanted to take the time to film this video. I'm really big on testimony and sharing things with people because sometimes somebody else is going through the same thing and maybe they didn't think of something that you might say that might help them, especially if it's something that you've come through and you kind of have a success story and you can help somebody with that success story. That's kind of what I love doing here on the channel. Other than all the homesteading content is just kind of sharing life with you guys. So a humongous thing about our lives is how we became debt-free because it essentially transformed our lives. Anybody out there that is in debt, you know what I'm talking about. When you owe a car payment or you owe a mortgage or you have credit cards, when you are in debt and you're having to make those monthly payments, you are a slave to that debt. And I will tell you guys, Joe and I know firsthand what it feels like to be a slave to debt. So as most of you know, we got married super young. I was 17 when I married Joe. He was 19. Nobody taught us about credit cards, about credit, how to build credit, what things will hurt your credit. Like we just jumped right into marriage, right into having our babies, right into life. And we, honest to goodness, did not know any better. So very early on in our marriage, Joe and I started accumulating credit card debt. He was working full-time at an auto parts store because he had already graduated high school, and I was working part-time as a bank teller on the side of finishing high school, right? So we didn't have a lot of money. So when it came to bills and buying groceries and things like that, sometimes we were short at the end of the month. And so what we did, I don't even know how we got approved for our first credit card. I don't remember that. I just know that we had a credit card. We started swiping that card to pay for groceries, swiping that card for some new clothes, swiping the card to eat out at restaurants. Like it was just so easy. And even though we knew we were being charged interest on what we were spending, we didn't realize how much interest and how fast that accumulates and how much we were really paying that credit card company just to use their money. So it seemed easy up front, but in the end, it was actually hurting us really bad. So fast forward, 15 years down the line, I would say, Joe and I had accumulated a significant amount of debt. We were in debt I would say about $90,000. To some of you, that may be like chump change. To some of you, you might be like, oh my gosh, that was our reality. That did include credit cards. That included our car loans, not our mortgage, of course, that we did have at the time, but that was our car loans. That was our credit card debt. And it was pretty significant. And I will tell you guys, if you know our story, I used to be in the military as well. We were dual active duty, and there was a moment in my life where I made the decision that I wanted to be home with my children full time. I didn't know how in the world I would ever get there because we were so in debt. And on top of that debt, we had a ginormous mortgage payment because we had a house that was like way too much house for us. And there was no way for me to quit my job to get out of the military and stay home with the kids. We simply couldn't afford it. We owed too many people money and we were a slave to those people. And the monthly payments on all that debt, you guys, was just like astronomical. It was ridiculous. So we got married young, we got into debt young, and then we kind of got in over our heads and we couldn't undo what we did. When we lived in this big ginormous house, I was still active duty and I decided to get my real estate license, as most of you know, and I started doing real estate on the side. Then I got into flipping houses and I started learning from local investors on how to use other people's money to flip houses and things like that. And it just kind of like opened up this can of worms for me, and I learned so many things that I did not know before about your credit score, how to build it, how to ruin it, how to use other people's money for free to finance the things that you want to do. And Joe and I, we flipped a couple houses, decided quickly that that really wasn't for us. It was just very involved, and there is risk that comes with that, and managing all the contractors. And for us, it just wasn't for us. It was fun while we did it. We made some money off of it, but we just decided that we did not want to continue that. But in order to flip these houses using other people's money, we had to learn how to get credit lines and credit cards for us to use that money. Now, if you're somebody that has bad credit, or you may not have credit at all, this might be a little bit different for you, because there's going to be a period of time where you've got to fix that credit, work on correcting those issues before any credit card companies will feel comfortable giving you a credit line. If you don't have credit at all yet, you've got to work on building that credit. But for us, even though we were in debt, we had decent credit. Joe and I have always had decent credit. We've always paid our bills on time. Y'all, if it killed me, I paid every credit card payment every month. Like, we were never late. We never missed a payment. So it hurt, but we were very responsible and accountable to that debt that we had accumulated. In the process of building these credit lines, going online, applying for credit cards and credit lines with companies, calling our bank, seeing what we could qualify for, we ended up accumulating just over $400,000 in credit lines in our name that were at our disposal that we could use at any time. And so what we would do is, instead of using our own money to purchase these homes to fund the rehabs, we would use these credit lines to purchase the homes and to fund the rehab. And then when we sold the house, we made all the money off the house, and we would pay those credit lines off. That's kind of how it worked. So I essentially learned how to make credit work for me. A lot of people are afraid of credit cards and using other people's money to do things, but I would propose to you that it's nothing to be afraid of, and credit can actually really work for you if you know how to use it wisely. One of the tricks, the biggest tricks that I learned from the investors in my area when we were flipping houses, is how to use 0% promotional rates from these credit card companies to use their money for free. So anytime we flipped a house or did anything with these credit lines, I wasn't paying interest on that money at all. So what happens is, these credit card companies, if they approve your application and they give you a credit line, the first thing they want you to do is to put money on that credit line, right? They want you to use that credit card. So typically, a lot of times, they will send you something in the mail. You may be very familiar with this. You may even get them in the mail, and they're called convenience checks. They're actual checks from that credit card company that you can use and either do a balance transfer, take the money from that credit card, put it directly into your bank account, or you can write those checks for whatever to use that money. But the cool thing is, with those convenience checks, a lot of times what comes with them is a promotional offer. Sometimes that offer is 0% APR for 6 months, for 12 months, for 18 months. I've seen 0% interest for up to 24 months on my credit cards before. What that means, you guys, is whatever you purchase with that credit card, you will not have any interest on that amount of money for whatever that term is. So when you're making your monthly payment on that amount, you are paying off the principal of that balance. You're not paying any interest to that company. So you're using their money for free. The important thing is to track when that promotional APR offer expires. So if it's 18 months that you get 0%, you want to make sure that you remember that date, you write it down somewhere, you make a note in your phone so that you don't forget. And just before that promotional offer expires, you're going to balance transfer that balance onto another card that also has a 0% APR. It is a little bit of finagling. It's playing the game, and can get kind of crazy if you're not organized with it, but it works. We flipped houses this way for free and made profit by doing this exact system. So at one point when I was flipping a home, I think the most I ever had out on credit lines was like $10 maybe 15 credit cards. We purchased a house for $60,000. The cost of the rehab was $35,000. That entire amount went on credit lines. So I had 10 or 15 credit cards out there with balances on them that were all at 0%. So to keep track of it, I just made myself a spreadsheet of the credit card, what the company it was with, what the credit limit was, what the balance was, what the expiration date of the 0% APR was, and that way I wouldn't lose track, and I just kept that ball rolling the whole time, and you guys, it worked. My first house I flipped, my CPA was like, where did you learn to do this? Like, this is insane. But it worked, and it's completely legal. There's nothing wrong with it. These credit card companies want you to use those cards, and their hope is that you won't pay them off before that 0% offer expires, and then you're gonna have a ton of interest that you have to pay them. But if you're smart and you're organized, it can really work for you. So once we kind of like got out of flipping houses, here I was left still with $400,000 of credit lines available to us. No balances on them, but those were cards we had applied for and got to flip houses. And I started thinking about it, and I'm like, if I could use their money to pay for a house and pay for a rehab at 0%, why can't I use these credit lines to consolidate the $90,000 of debt that we had over here on these cards that we were paying interest on since we were a young married couple, and pay them off completely? Now that $90,000 debt is on these credit cards, so I still have the debt, but I'm not paying interest, which was making our monthly payments through the roof. There were some months, you guys, I don't know how we maintained it and even put food in the fridge with these credit card payments that we had. So I sat down, made a spreadsheet, started thinking through it, and that's exactly what I did. Now, it takes time. You've got to sit down, you've got to call the companies. If you don't currently have any 0% promotional offers on your credit card, all you do is call your credit card company and you say, hey, I'm looking to do a purchase, and I've had this card with you guys for 6 months or a year or however long you've had it, and say, do you guys have any promotional offers that you can offer me at this time? And just be quiet and see what they say. If they don't have any promotional offers for you, or if they just have something like, oh, we can give you 10.9%, no thank you, have a nice day, and you don't use that company. I do not use any company that will not offer me 0% promotional offers. I just won't do it. It goes completely against what I'm trying to do, which is use other people's money for free. It's a simple phone call, and a lot of times, I would say 8 times out of 10, that company is like, yeah, actually, we've got 2 offers here for you. We've got 0% where you can do a balance transfer, or we've got 2.9% on blah, blah, blah. All we're listening for is that 0%. And a lot of times you can write that convenience check that they send you for that card directly to yourself. You can deposit that check into your checking account and then use that money for whatever you want to use it for. Or you can do a balance transfer. If you've got a credit card you want to pay off like I did, you can ask that company to just do a balance transfer and pay that off, and now you've got the new balance with the 0%. So Joe and I took those credit cards at 0%, paid off the $90,000 that we had, and I cannot tell you guys the relief that I had with the new credit card payments that had 0 interest. So during this time, Joe and I decided that we wanted to start homesteading. You guys have kind of heard me talk about this. So we started looking for land that we could build a homestead on, because at this time we were living in this big, huge house in an HOA. I couldn't even have my chickens, and I had this really big dream, and I didn't know how to make that happen. But I was a realtor, so naturally I started kind of looking in the system, just kind of checking out the area and looking for land that was available. Well, we found an 18-acre gorgeous piece of undeveloped land that had a creek running through it, backed up to state land, so no one was going to be building around us. It was just like this perfect piece of property, but they already had an offer in on it. I made an offer on this land. Of course, Joe and I went and checked it out and decided it was the one that we wanted. And the way that I made my offer more appealing to the seller than the other buyer is I offered them cash. I knew how to use these credit lines and get cash out of them at 0%. So did I have what was it? I think the land was $67,000. Did I have $67,000 cash sitting in the account? No. In fact, I was in debt 90 grand. So, but I had $400,000 of credit lines available to me at any point. I liquidated the money for the land so that I had cash in my account and I could show proof of funds that I actually had the cash to close. And of course, the seller was very excited about a cash offer, because with a loan, you have to wait for the buyer's lender to do appraisals and inspections and all the things behind the scenes that underwriting does. And with a cash offer, it's easier and it's a lot quicker. So fast forward a little bit, we got the land. So we've got the land. I now have my $90,000 of debt over here on these credit lines at 0%. And I've got the cost of our land over here on these credit cards at 0%. So I'm working the game, but in my mind, my anxiety is a little high, right? Because 90 plus 60 something thousand dollars, we're significantly in debt now. So I'm just like, okay, hoping all this is going to work out and be okay, because we had talked to our lender that was going to give us the loan to build our farmhouse, and we were going to do a construction loan. So once we did the construction loan and we consolidated the cost of the build of the house, we could consolidate the land into that. I could then go and pay off those credit cards that I used to purchase the land. So that was the plan all along, right? Now, in the midst of all this, we are under contract for the land, getting ready to close, getting ready to work with the lender on building our dream farmhouse. And this is where it gets interesting, you guys. And our debt-free story really isn't something amazing that Joe and I did, although we did take the things that we learned from the investors when we were flipping houses to kind of lessen the blow on the debt that we were in to make the payments possible for our family. Our debt-free story really is a God thing, and I truly believe that. And when I look back on the sequence of events of how this went down, it's actually really unbelievable, and I get really emotional about it, because when you're obedient to God, God is going to bless you. And sometimes we miss what he's saying to us because we're not listening, or we're not in the word, and we're not close to him. And he's not going to speak to us if we're not close to him. He's going to turn his face from us if we're ignoring him. And during this time period, it was a time in our marriage where we were getting closer to God than we ever had been. We were going to church on a regular basis with our children. We got baptized. I made a goal to read the Bible in a year, and I did it. And you guys, when you're up at 4 a.m. every morning reading the Bible for an hour, you get close to the Lord, and you start to hear him speaking to you, and he starts working through your heart and through your life. And that's kind of what was going on behind the scenes when we were trying to get rid of the big house payment, move to the country, and build a homestead. My relationship with Christ was growing stronger, and in general as a family it was too. We were tithing for the first time ever continuously, without question, giving back, and just really making decisions towards growing our relationship with God. So in the midst of this, I had not spoken to my grandparents in just over 20 years. My grandmother and I had a falling out when I was a teenager, and I had not spoke to them for 20 years. Now, you guys know my Nampa, right? Lives here on the property with us. This is my Nana and Nampa that you guys always hear me talking about. So I don't remember how we started talking again. I don't remember if I sent them a Christmas card and then he called me. I can't remember how this rekindled. But after 20 years, all of a sudden, me and my grandfather had a conversation. And when I called him to talk to him, I knew instantly something was wrong, because they owned a small business for almost 50 years, and my Nana was like the secretary, and she would answer the phone, and she did the appointments, and she did all the business stuff. Well, when I called, she didn't answer the phone, my Nampa did. And long story short, she was 70-something years old, and she was sick, kind of losing her mind, and he had to put her in a nursing home because he couldn't manage everything and taking care of her. And we just kind of started rekindling our relationship through phone calls. We would send each other emails. And in the midst of this, we decided to fly to California and visit my Nampa. And then we went to the nursing home to see my Nana as well. And that was the last time I ever saw her alive. So it was a rough thing. I'm glad that I got to be there for my grandpa, for the, setting up the funeral. He had some issues with that, and I was able to help him through that because he's got a hard time hearing and a hard time seeing, and the funeral home really tried to take advantage of him, and it was just not a nice situation. So I was glad I was able to be there to advocate for him. But one day we came back to his house, and we were sitting on his back porch, and I asked him, I said, Nampa, you don't have Nana anymore. You don't have a lot of your friends anymore. Like, you guys, he outlived everybody. So here he was sitting in California all by himself with a business that he could barely keep running. And I was like, we just bought 18 acres in Virginia. We're going to build a farm. Why don't you come move to Virginia with us? Like, would you ever consider that? And to my surprise, he was like, well, I actually been thinking about that. And I was like, you have? So fast forward, he decided that he wanted to come move to Virginia with us. And so he started working in California to do an estate sale, get his house on the market to sell so he could move to Virginia. So while Nampa was in California working hard to settle everything there so he could move to Virginia with us, we were closing on the land here in Virginia. And you guys, we went to the lender to get the construction loan to build our home on our new piece of property. And we found out that during the title search of the property, they missed the fact that there was no easement of access to our land. So our land was landlocked. And what that means, for those of you that don't know, is you cannot access your property without going through someone else's property to get to it. And you can't just do that without a written easement, an agreement of that owner saying, sure, yes, you can drive through my property to get to your property. And that easement, that agreement, is recorded at the court with the deed for the land. And if that's not there, that is a problem. So the situation was that where we bought land, there was hardly anybody living out there, and it was really a lot of old timers that the land had been subdivided to so-and-so and so-and-so and gifted to their niece and nephew. And, back then they didn't care about easements. Like, if they were going to drive through their brother's lot to get to their lot, they didn't need something in writing saying they could. They were family. So the road that we drove down, the dirt road to go to our property, had been a road and had been used by everybody that lived out there for over 40 years that we could track with the deed records at the courthouse. And we had to go through 9 different parcels of land, 9 different properties to get to our property that we bought. But when we went to build our farmhouse, the lender has a title search done, and it was uncovered during that title search that, hey, even though they say you can use that road, it's nowhere in writing that you are authorized to do that. So until you get an easement and get an agreement in writing, you cannot build. We will not give you a loan to build your home on this property. So if you guys think about what we've been talking about, I'm $90,000 in debt over here, $60-something thousand in debt over here. I think it was $67,500 that we bought the land for. And I know that I have a ticking clock over here on this money because those promotional APRs are going to expire at some point. And when they expire, those monthly payments are going to go through the roof. These payments plus these payments of 0%, we would have went bankrupt. There was no way I could have paid all of that every month. So now I'm panicking. So fast forward again, I start literally going to the neighbors, the lots that we have to go through to get to our farmland with Joe, and pretty much groveling to these people to sign this easement document that an attorney had drafted for us. Some of the owners were super sweet and were like, of course, and they signed off on it. Some of them were kind of nasty about it. We almost had to beg them to sign it. Some of them didn't even live in the state of Virginia, so we had to track them down. They just owned the land because it was passed down from their family. You guys, the easement battle was real. If I would have known this was a problem with this land, I would have never purchased this property, but I didn't know. I hired a title company to do a title search for me, and they failed to uncover the fact that there was no easement of access. So thankfully, when we bought the land, we did purchase owner's title insurance. And I will tell you, as your friend and as a realtor, I would always recommend that you purchase owner's title insurance when you close on a home or a piece of property, because that insurance is a one-time fee that protects you for the life of the time that you own that property. It's not like car insurance where you make a monthly payment every month. It's a one-time fee at closing, usually pretty reasonable, and you don't pay on it anymore. But that insurance policy is there for you if any problems like this ever arise on your land. There's an easement issue, or someone comes knocking on your door that says, hey, my great-great-granddaddy owned this land. I think I have a claim on this land. You contact that title insurance company, and as long as it's covered under that policy, they will pay and fight for you on your behalf. Thank God we purchased owner's title insurance. So we were able to contact the insurance company and start the process of getting an attorney to draft the easement, get surveyors out to the property. I mean, it was just this huge thing. And in the midst of all of this, we couldn't build. We had this land that we were living on. We had already sold our big house in the HOA and decided to just go ahead and buy an RV and live on the 18-acre property. So we lived on this 18-acre property for months before all this was, dealt with and we could start building. But in the midst of it, I called my Nampa in California, and I broke down on the phone and I started crying. And I was almost embarrassed about the situation I had got us in, because I was blaming myself, and I felt like, wow, did I jump the gun on this? Did I not really wait for the voice of God to say, yes, Tina, this is the door I want you to go through? Did I jump the gun by using the credit lines to pay for the land, and now I'm like screwed? I just had all these things going on in my head, and I didn't know how to get out of this situation. So when I talked to my grandpa, I was just bawling my eyes out, told him the situation we were in, that we were trying to work with the title insurance company to get this easement corrected. But until we had an easement in writing, notarized and recorded, signed by all 9 owners, we could not build our home. And my grandpa said to me, well, what if we just build the farmhouse in cash? And I thought, no. I knew what he was saying. He was getting ready to sell his house in California. He had profit. Obviously, they bought that back in like the 1800s. No, I'm just kidding. But they bought it like forever ago. It's done been paid off. And I just thought, no, I cannot take any money from you, because it just goes against who I am. You guys, I was raised by a single mom who raised 4 kids on her own. We were on welfare. We lived in a trailer most of the time. I was in and out of foster care. I mean, we had a rough road when I was a kid. And one thing that I have always been very big on is working for what I have. I don't take handouts from anybody. But in this situation, I saw no way out. I thought, am I being prideful? Like, maybe God rekindled mine and my grandfather's relationship at the very time that he did, because he knew what was coming. He sees everything before we do. Like, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. I had no idea what I was getting myself into and what was going to happen when we bought that land. And if it wasn't for my grandfather, I probably would have had to file bankruptcy, because those promotions would have ran out and I wouldn't have been able to afford the payments on all those credit lines. So after much prayer, after much discussion with Joe, we decided, maybe this is our only way out of this terrible situation that we were in, because there was no end in sight with the title insurance claim on getting the easement. We were at the mercy of the title insurance company. We were at the mercy of the owners of the land themselves, the different properties. We would mail the easement to them, and you guys, they had no sense of urgency. My emergency was not their emergency. They would sit on this easement with it on their kitchen counter for a month, just thinking about signing it if they want to sign it, if they don't, or, oh, we're going to, we just hadn't got to it. And here I am freaking out because I've got all these credit cards that I used to buy this land, and these promotions are going to run out very soon. So we were at the mercy of all the people involved in this situation. So we took my grandfather's gift, and I call it a gift because that's what it was. He did not have to do that. He and my Nana worked hard their entire lives to get what they had. And for all intents and purposes, he didn't know me anymore. He didn't know Joe. He didn't know my children. He didn't know us. I hadn't spoke to my grandparents in 20 years. And this man is offering me the cash needed to build our farmhouse so that I could pay off those credit lines and not go bankrupt. So that's what my NAMPA did. And so my NAMPA became our lender, our private lender. In investing, that's what we call it. It's a private lender. It's not a bank or an institution that's loaning you the money. It's a private lender, and that's what my grandpa became for us. He loaned us the money to build our farmhouse, and we then made a monthly payment to him to repay him. So we ended up using my grandfather's money, got with an architect, got with the builder, built our beautiful dream farmhouse on this land. And in the background, the title insurance company was still working on getting this easement for our property. Because you might think, well, who cares about the easement now? You've got the farmhouse built, everything's paid off. But the problem is, if we ever needed to sell that land, which we ended up doing, you could not sell it because that buyer coming in would most likely be using a lender, wouldn't have all that cash to buy that, so they'd be getting a loan to purchase it, and we would not be able to close without an easement. Their lender would uncover the same thing our lender found, that there was no easement of access and the land was landlocked. So it was something that had to be fixed no matter what. Do you guys know it took the title insurance company 18 months to get a fully signed, notarized, and recorded easement for our property? 18 months, you guys. Those 0% promotional APRs on those credit cards would have just been done, gone, and expired, and Joe and Tina would have been bankrupt if we did not have my NAMPA help us out of that terrible situation that we were in. 18 months it took them to get that easement. And y'all know I made like 24 copies of it and like hid it inside the walls and stuff. Like, I'm like, oh no, there is an easement on this property now, boy, I'll tell you what. So it was just a horrific experience, but out of that came something so amazing. Lexi and I flew to California, got my NAMPA. We drove back with my NAMPA in his RV, and he moved into the farm property with us, and he's been with us ever since. And having my grandpa here has been an amazing thing. And, you know, Parker and Lexi, they've got their grandpa, and he's not alone. He's got family to spend the holidays with, and his birthday, and have dinner with us, and just be a part of something and not be alone in California. And so I think that he gave us a gift, and maybe I like to think that we were able to give him a gift of family and love in return. I said I wasn't going to get emotional. So in the short 2 years that we owned the farm, we took that property from nothing and we built it from the ground up. We put a house on it. We did a chicken coop. We did a humongous greenhouse. I'll link that here for you guys. That was our first greenhouse we ever built. We had a dairy cow. We had a milk stanchion and barn that we built, gardens, and I mean, fencing around the property. We put a detached shop on the property for Joe. Just did a ton of work. I mean, blood, sweat, and tears, you guys. Like, we cleared the land by hand for the farmhouse, like 3 acres of trees. Joe and I cleared it with a riding mower, a chainsaw, and an axe. I'm not kidding you. Joe got a hernia out of it, and I had a tailbone injury from sitting on the riding mower, clearing 3 acres. But we were saving money, not paying a company to do it. But blood, sweat, and tears, and so much love went into building this farm from the ground up. 2 years later, you know, we're living our best life on the homestead, and Joe and I started realizing with the market changing, we were like, man, I wonder what this property is worth now. Like, we bought the land for this. This is how much the farmhouse took to build. What is it worth now? And you guys, when we looked into it with everything that we had added to the property, the greenhouse, the garage, the fencing, the barns, like everything, the value we had added was significant. And we sat down and had a talk with my NAMPA and everything, and it was just like, wow, the amount of money that we could make if we sold this property it would allow us to completely pay off that $90,000 of debt that we had been in and enslaved to for our entire lives. So we started thinking about it, and long story short, because there's so much that goes behind that decision. We sold off the animals, lots of tears. I mean, it was hard to take something we had built and worked on so hard and go, okay, like we're just going to sell it. Like we did all this just to sell it. But Joe was like, Tina, I don't think that was ever our farm. And when he said that to me and we talked about it, we really both believe that the whole situation, like if you come out and you look at it from like a 30,000 foot view and you look down at what happened, if all that didn't happen, and if I didn't rekindle the relationship with my grandfather, we would have still been in debt. I would have still been in the military. I wouldn't be home with my children. I wouldn't be able to homeschool Parker. Like, I wouldn't be able to do anything that I'm doing now. And we would still be in debt. So Joe's like, we knew we didn't want to retire in Virginia anyway. And he only had a few years until retirement from the military. So it's like, that wasn't going to be our forever home anyway. God orchestrated all of that and allowed us to go through what we went through to help us be free from the debt that we were in. And also to grow in our relationship with him. Because one thing I really learned through that whole experience is when God closes a door, don't try to kick it down. It's closed for a reason. And you've got to be close to him so you can hear his voice and hear him speaking to you and walk through the doors that he's opening for you, and don't try to kick down the ones that he's clearly shut. So our debt-free story was really kind of a combination between me using the things I learned in my real estate flipping business to consolidate credit, use other people's money for free so that those payments were manageable and we could keep our heads above water. And then also my grandfather coming in and saving the day and giving us a gift that we could have never imagined. Joe and I both come from, we're not rich. We do not come from backgrounds where we had money. Neither one of us were raised with money. So to have my grandfather come in after 20 years and give us that gift is something I never could have imagined would ever happen. As I always say, you guys, this is just my experience, mine and Joe's experience, things that we've gone through, things that we've learned. Everybody's situation is different. I hope that this has been helpful to you in some way. And if you guys have any questions about any of this, or you're thinking about implementing anything like this with your credit and you're not sure of something, or I need to clarify something that I said, just leave me a comment. I will always answer you guys and do my best. I am no expert by any means. I'm just a human that has been through some stuff, and I learned some things along the way. And you can also email me directly at blessedandbeautifulhomestead@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with me if you stayed for the whole video, and I will see you guys on the next one.
She's just gonna run.
Yeah!
Joey. She said, fine, I'll just sit down. Oh, wow, they found themselves a jungle gym. He's pooping. Oh.
Wait, no, hold on.
Wait, no!
Oh my God.
You're 10 times his size. Go.
I don't care.
Just go. Show him who's boss.
Yeah, okay.
He's just a little bird. What's he gonna do? Crow back.